Ryomen Sukuna is the most feared character in the entire Jujutsu Kaisen series, and the reason for this is very self-evident. He is ruthless, and on top of his ruthlessness, he is one of, if not the strongest characters within the series. But how strong is he? If you're on my channel a couple of weeks ago, you saw my Gojo's power quantified video. And this video will be just like that one, where we will use real life math and science to find out how strong Sukuna is, how fast Sukuna is, how quickly he can accelerate, and how much damage he can take. If you were on my channel, if you're a returning viewer from that video, or you're just brand new, you just clicked on this video and you've never seen me before, consider liking and subscribing because that would be greatly appreciated. And if you want to see me do this with any other character or any other topic in relation to mathematics and science, that's kind of my bread and butter. Comment it down in the comments below and I'll get onto it. But without further ado, the best way to get into topics like these is just to jump right into it. And my favorite section is what we'll start with, which is strength. To find out how strong someone is, we need to find out how much energy can they output. To do this with Sukuna, we are going to use his strongest attack. In that case, it's Malevolent Shrine. Essentially, to dumb it down, it is essentially a volume where anything and everything caught within that volume is essentially cut so much that is essentially pulverized. So that's the assumptions we're going to use it with. One of his most prevalent times that he's used the attacks is during the Shibuya incident where he just completely wiped out a 140-meter radius, and you can see that in the photo here. As you can see right there, there was nothing within volume that could survive the attacks. No types of concrete, no type of steel. You name any common material within construction, it was destroyed by the cuts. This is important to note because we've actually never seen the upper limit of Sukuna's cuts. We've never seen them fail to cut something. So we are going to superimpose this limit on it, and because we're superimposing this limit on it, the values we're going to get for strength are going to be an underestimation. The second assumption we're going to make is that the volume in the cuts, which had happened, we're going to assume it to be a hemisphere. The reason I believe this is because the ground is not catered in. We can clearly see a flat surface and which the arc can then be constructed from. Other than that, there are a few more assumptions that I used when making these calculations, but going over them would be a lengthy process. If you want to read in specifics the assumptions I made, there's a Google document that shows all my work in the description below. Other than that, let's get to some calculations. First, and the easiest thing to actually find is the volume. The one he used in Shibuya was 140 meters, but we know that his maximum range is a 200 meter radius. So plugging, we know the volume, the formula for the volume of a hemisphere or half a sphere. We know R to be 200 meters. We plug that in and we get a value a little under 17 million meters cubed. That one's very easy to find out. The pressure is not so much. Pressure, we need to use material science. Specifically, we need to find out what kind of pressure is being used. When we think of cutting and how cutting actually works at in a physical sense is when you've ever cut chicken before, what you're actually doing, instead of pressing down, what you're doing is applying a tangential force over a very small area, that being the edge of the blade. And there's a special name for that, and that is called a shear stress or shear pressure. Unfortunately for us, we need to find the strongest material within that's common in construction, and then find out that material's ultimate shear stress, or what is the maximum amount of shear stress that material is able to take before failing, deforming, or in our case being cut. So after looking around, the strongest material I could find that is common within construction is steel 1090 mild. And unfortunately for us, there is no, at least that I could find, there was no direct charts that had like numerical values for their ultimate shear stress, but there was one for ultimate tensile stress. And then that value was 841 megapascals. But we still need the shear stress. fortunately for us, there's a rule of thumb to calculate the ultimate shear stress given a tensile stress. In this case, the ultimate shear stress equals the ultimate tensile strength times 0.75. Knowing the ultimate tensile stress, if we plug that in, we get an ultimate shear stress of a little over 630 megapascals of pressure. Finally, once we know the pressure and the volume, we can plug it into this very handy energy equation, E equals P times V. We know the volume, we know the pressure, we plug those values in, and we get an energy of 1.41 times 10 to the power of 16 joules of energy. That equates to about 3.4 megatons of TNT. If you saw my Gojo video, Gojo had a value that we calculated to be 1.7 times 10 to the 16. So Sukuna actually had less energy. It's about 82.9% of what we calculated for Gojo. But this isn't too crazy to say because we've imposed the pressure limit. It's likely that Sukuna's pressure could be much greater than that of what we calculated or that of what we found. But we've never seen that limit, so we have just imposed a limit on it. So just keep in mind that this is likely not indicative of his total strength. He could likely output energy far greater than this, but for what we know, that's the value we get. Of course, his maximum energy output does not equate to the maximum strength of his punches. To do that, we can say that his energy output in his punches is some arbitrary fraction less than his maximum energy. So, for example, let's say his punch produces 1/1 billionth of the energy he can totally output. That would leave 14.1 million joules of energy. If we want to make that into a force, and we say the force propagates only for 1 meter, we can use this formula, and that gives a force of 14.1 million newtons. So that is the strength section of Sukuna. Very strong, very heavy hitter. But let's get to something that's even less clear-cut than that, and that is his speed. Now, speed is a headache because there's a lot of arguments for the speed of the characters in Jujutsu Kaisen. If you watched my video last week, we had to find Gojo's speed relative to Toji's speed. So we found that Toji and in turn Maki move at about Mach 3 speed. Not only is that implied in the show, we got a value close to that in actual calculations, so that checks out. And if we wanted to say that Toji moves at Mach 3, and then adult Gojo is 100 times or like 10 times faster than Toji, that would make Gojo Mach 30, right? That's kind of the thought process that I used. Of course, the multiplier can be argued, so instead of 10 times, it could be 100 times faster, 1,000 times faster. It's all argumentative in that case. But in this case, I think I actually found a way to kind of pinpoint their speeds a little bit better than I did in that video. So let's get into this. There's a lot of arguments that I've seen that characters such as Hikari and Kashimo can move at lightning speeds. And since Hikari is kind of relative to both Maki and Yuta, they're within those speeds as well. I disagree. There's a very big difference between lightning speed and or movement speed and reaction speed. Apologies. So basically, the arguments for the lightning speed occur between the fight with Kashimo and Hikari, and Kashimo uses a bunch of electrical, or in this case, we're going to make them lightning attacks, and Hikari doesn't die, essentially. So with that in mind, there's a lot of arguments saying that he is lightning speed. I disagree. And here's the evidence I have for that. Maki is stated to move about Mach 3. Of course, she can be faster at points in the future since that statement was made. But if we look into the fight with Kashimo and Hikari, if we were going to extrapolate, which isn't actually that much of an extrapolation, that Maki, Yuta, and Hikari are the next big three behind that of Gojo. So it's essentially to say that they are relative. Furthermore, Kashimo and Hikari's fight, while I will admit that Hikari did have reaction times of that of lightning, he did not have movement speed of that of lightning. That's shown many times in the fight. His arm was torn off. He had to redirect the lightning when it was coming for his head. And in the third instance, it was a direct attack. It was a direct landing strike. So yeah, that's just evidence enough that although he was able to react to it, he was able to react, like see it, process the information. He could not move out of the way. In fact, he even says that he almost died 3 whole times in that fight. In this case, obviously referencing those electrical attacks. And since Kashimo was relative to Hakari, Kashimo also is at the speed of lightning within that fight. That being said, just because Kashimo wasn't the speed of lightning within that fight, doesn't mean I don't believe he never reached the speed of lightning within the series. I'm referencing Kashimo's beast transformation. Essentially, this is a transformation where most of Kashimo's body turns into electricity or lightning. It's not 100% lightning. He still does have his neurons. It's stated that his neurons are amped by the electrical currents flowing within him. But basically, the composition, most of his body's composition changed to that of lightning. If we want to extrapolate that his body, since it became mostly lightning, that we could say that Kashimo is either as fast or maybe slightly slower since he is not entirely lightning. But just for simplicity's sake, let's say he is lightning speed due to these qualities. Since he was able to fight Sukuna, and Sukuna did win, he did kill Kashimo, we can infer that Sukuna is also the speed of lightning. In this case, I'm referring specifically to the lightning leader. And obviously with this extrapolation, since Gojo and Sukuna were very relative, Gojo is also the speed of lightning. So this is kind of a note to myself that this is even better, I think, for Gojo's speed than the one we calculated back then, but it also applies to Sukuna. So Sukuna and Gojo are the speed of the leaders of lightnings. For reference, it's about 200,000 miles per hour, or a little over 89,000 meters per second. We're also going to assume that their running speed is comparable to their fighting speed. To put this in reference, if Maki and Toji were Mach 3, Gojo and Sukuna are Mach 260. So pretty insane. Just to nip this one in the bud, because I know I'm probably going to get some comments on it, that there are some arguments that say Sukuna is light speed. And the reason this is because Kashimo is able to use attacks that are electromagnetic radiation. In this case, electromagnetics, their wavelengths move at the speed of light. And since Sukuna was able to dodge it, that should infer that he is the speed of light and faster. I disagree with this line of argument. I'm going to need to see it animated in order for it to either change my mind or to support my hypothesis. But from how I interpret what was being shown is that Sukuna didn't dodge the attack after it was activated, but rather dodged the attack before it was activated. So to kind of give an example, it's like someone who dodges gunfire by moving out of the line of sight of the barrel before the trigger was pulled versus someone moving out of the way of a bullet already in motion. That's kind of how I see it. One, it's way more reasonable, and the latter one, not so much. But if you disagree and you have some good evidence on why you disagree, just let me know in the comments. You can probably change my mind if there's some really good evidence for it. So that's the speed. We have his strength, we have his speed, now his acceleration. Now his acceleration, like his speed, was very hard to find. This one is going to be speculatory with no evidence. And the reason that is because nothing's been animated yet to find not only acceleration but also speed. We need a time frame. And since nothing's been animated, we don't really have a time frame. So we're going to need to use some speculation here. So how fast can Sukuna go from 0 miles per hour to 89,000 miles per hour? In this case, we're going to use the time it takes for him to do that as the same as it takes an average car, to go from 0 to 60 miles per hour. And on average, cars can reach those speeds in about a little under 5 seconds, but we're going to round it up to 5 seconds for simplicity's sake. So now if we take the change in velocity over the change in time, we can get an acceleration of almost 18,000 meters per second squared. It's real crazy accelerations. Just like his speed, we're going to assume that his running acceleration is equivalent to his fighting acceleration. Of course, I'm going to reiterate this. This acceleration is speculatory at best. There's no evidence. That's essentially what I'm trying to say. But with all those off the table, the last thing we're left with is durability. Now, actually, this was the most fun for me. I'm going to be honest. There's a couple ways to find durability. And durability, I like to find it within a range rather than a fixed number. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the minimum amount of force that he can take and the maximum amount of force that he can take. So let's start off with the easy one and find the minimum. In this case, it is even less than a minimum. It is an exaggerated minimum, because what we're going to be using to find his minimum is actually when he was 15-finger Sukuna. And this is actually, we're going to use his fight with Jogo. And you might be wondering, how are we going to use this fight with Jogo to find his durability? Jogo never managed to hit him. And you are right. But Jogo did use his maximum meteor, which he thinks could have damaged Sukuna. Even though it's likely not to kill him, even if it was any type of damage, that's good enough for me. And Sukuna confirms his statement by saying, if it had hit. He likely said this mockingly, but if we are to take this statement with some degree of truth, we can continue using this form of thinking. So there's a couple things we need to know. We need to know the mass of the meteor, which I'm going to use this image here to find the mass of the meteor, and we need to find the velocity which it would have hit the ground with. And to do that, we're going to use the whole shot, like the animated shot, but just for video's sake, we're going to use these two images here, which is the image we get right before the impact and the image during the impact. So let's find the mass of the meteor. So when we scale the meteor to a story in the background, the story is about 4 meters. That's about 14 markers. 14 times 4 is 56 meteors. To find the volume of the meteor, we're going to assume it's a perfect sphere. We can plug the radius into the sphere formula, and we get over 735 million meters cubed. Now we have to find the mass by multiplying the volume times the density. Fortunately for us, this one's not too bad, because we can see that when the meteor is being formed, it really has a big suction. It suctions up material from the area. If we're going to assume that most of the material it sucks up is concrete, we can use the density of concrete to find the mass. If the density of concrete is 2,400 kilograms per meters cubed, multiply that by the volume, and we get a mass of 1.77 times 10 to the 9 kilograms. So that's the mass. Let's get to the velocity. So after scaling how much the distance of the meteor movement in that last frame of impact, we can see that it moved a distance of its entire diameter, or double its radius, in about less than a second. We're going to round it up to be a second for simplicity's sake. And once we plug those values in, we get a velocity of 112 meters per second. 112 meters per second. I was about to say squared. Just 112 meters per second. Knowing these values, we can now use in the kinetic energy equation. So plug in the mass, plug in the velocity, and we get an energy of 1.107 times 10 to the power of 13 joules. To put this into perspective, that's about 2.6 kilotons of TNT. This is a bare minimum, keep in mind, because not only is this a bare minimum for 20-finger Sukuna, this is a bare minimum for 15-finger Sukuna. So 20-finger Sukuna is much stronger than 15-finger Sukuna. But we can use it as a bare minimum estimate. There is actually, if you stay by the end of the video, there is actually one more thing I found, which is even less than that, but it's so much less that we can confirm it's an outlier because it is the least amount of energy he receives in the entire series, yet it causes the most amount of damage, which intuitively doesn't make sense because we've seen him take stronger attacks and walk it off. So, but I'm not going to use that because, like I said, it's an outlier. But if you want to see that calculation, I'll leave it for the very end of the video. But continuing on our thing, we want to find the maximum range of durability. And when I mean maximum, I mean an insane amount of maximum. So let's get into it. In our previous video with Gojo and quantifying Gojo's power, we found that a 120% amped Gojo, because of that Black Flash, he was able to use his Hollow Purple, which had an energy output of 1.7 times 10 to the 16 joules. And Sukuna did survive. But that is not the strongest attack Sukuna has survived, because at the beginning of the fight, Gojo used a 200% amped Hollow Purple, and in this case it was actually a direct blast because Sukuna caught it with his hands. I don't know how he survived, but whatever, right? I don't care how he survived that. It just matters that he did. Fortunately for us, if we know how much energy he used at 120%, we can rearrange the percentages to find how much energy his 200% Hollow Purple would have. So if we plug it into this formula here, we get his maximum energy at 200% to be 2.83 times 10 to the power of 16 joules. That's from his 200% Hollow Purple, which Sukuna survived a direct impact from. I'll admit this is an extreme overestimate, but it's within our estimation. Probably it's within the range. So if we want to find a range for Sukuna's durability, it's between 2.6 kilotons of TNT to 6.76 megatons of TNT. And that's it. Yeah, we've answered all the questions we wanted answered. We found Sukuna's strength, we've found his speed, found his acceleration, and we found his range for his durability. But other than that, that's kind of all I have for you. If you made it this far, thank you. And if you made it this far and enjoyed it, like and subscribe. Tell me what you want to see next. Other than that, I'm going to finish off the calculation I promised earlier. So if you want to see anything else from Sukuna, you won't really find anything after this point. But for those of you who are sticking around, let us begin. So the moment I was talking about where Sukuna received the most amount of damage from the least amount of force is actually within Gojo's last 120% Hollow Purple. The reason he received the least amount of force was because he wasn't hit directly by that 1.6 times 10 to the 16 joules directly. He was a good distance away, and the blast was a blast. So as you get away from the origin, the force decreases because the area increases. So knowing this, we can find out how much force he experienced from the distance he was at from the epicenter. So let us assume he was 100 meters away from the epicenter of the blast. And if we assume that the system, in this case being the blast, is an ideal system, so it's adiabatic, it doesn't lose any energy, energy is conserved, so it doesn't lose any in friction or anything like that. It's a perfect system. We can find, equating the two energies at the initial point and the last point, we can convert these two energies into their PV states. So P1V1 equals P2V2. We want to find P2 in this case, so rearranging the formula, we know the pressure at 1, which we calculated from the previous video, and then plug in the values we know for the volumes. In this case, V2 being the volume with the radius where Sukuna's location would be, and then we can find the pressure he experiences, which comes out to be 8.13 times 10 to the power of 9 pascals. Now, once we know the pressure, we can now find the force by multiplying it over the area, which being Sukuna's body. The area where we used an average area for a male between the ages of 20 to 70, I think it was, which is 2.06 meters squared. We're going to divide that by 2. because we're going to assume that only half of his body experiences that force at once. And he gets 8.37 times 10 to the power of 9 newtons. Not that much force. For example, if we want to convert into energies, because that's what we've been using, if we assume that the force propagates for 1 meter, which he feels, force times distance, that gives 8.37 times 10 to the power of 9 joules. Much less than even the bare minimum we calculated for 15-finger Sukuna in his fight with Jogo, which is why I consider this one to be an outlier. But that's all I have for you. If you stuck around, if you kind of said everything already, but if you made it even this far and you haven't liked and subscribed, do it. Other than that, that's all I have for y'all. Peace out. Have a good day.